Let's see. I believe Alan, right? Alan está aquí. We're still missing Jose, James, Charles, and Muskan is here. Okay, awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I know things are pretty crazy, aren't they? 2020 has been pretty difficult. El año ha sido muy difícil, right? This year's been pretty difficult. But I'm doing pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. All right. So, talking about the weather. ¿Qué tiempo hace? What's the weather like? So this is really important. This is important that we're able to have these conversations about the weather, right? Because sometimes we ask ourselves what the weather is like when we look outside so that we know what we need to wear for the day. Sometimes if we have a friend or a family member who is in a different state, so un amigo, parte de la familia que están en otro lugar, they're in a different place, we can ask them, what's the weather like where you are? ¿Qué tiempo hace? So, many expressions for the weather, so when we're talking about the weather, many of them begin with the word hace. And the word hace is a form of the verb hacer. So, for example, we've been learning about the verb ser, S-E-R, ser. It means to be, right? And then we learn about different forms of that verb, ser. So, soy, eres, es, I am, you are, he is, she is. Nosotros somos, we are. So we have a verb, ser, and then we have different forms of the verb. It's the same with all verbs. And hacer, this verb means to do or make. So this is a very common verb in Español. Usamos este verbo mucho. We use this verb a lot. Think about how many times a day you say the word do. I do, you do, he does, she does, we do. All the time. Okay? Es lo mismo en Español. It's the same in Spanish. So, for example, again, what's the weather like? ¿Qué tiempo hace? Okay, so stay muted, but I want you to try saying that to yourself. ¿Qué tiempo hace? ¿Qué tiempo hace? So if someone asks you this, si alguien te pregunta eso, you can respond with, hace buen tiempo. The weather is nice. So we've talked a lot about how Spanish and English, most of the time, they don't translate perfectly. It doesn't translate word for word. We're not really translating words as much as we're translating ideas. So for example, we say the weather is nice. If we tried to translate hace buen tiempo word for word, it would literally say makes good weather. Okay? Or does good weather. Right? That's not how we say it. So that's why it's important to remember that it doesn't translate perfectly. We say hace buen tiempo. And that in English is more or less, that idea translates more or less to the weather is nice. So if we want to say the weather is bad, hace mal tiempo. Hace mal tiempo. And if we want to say it's cool, so maybe it's not very cold outside, no hace frío, but it's cool. So a lot of times when we wake up in the morning and we go outside, it's cool outside, but it's not necessarily cold, right? So we can say hace fresco, it's cool. We get this in California a lot, right? Because it doesn't get super cold here, but it does get cool, especially in the wintertime, in the mornings, por las mañanas, and then it might get warmer throughout the day. Okay, here's some other expressions that we would use to talk about the weather. Hace calor. Okay, it's hot. This is something we're going to say in California a lot, right? Because it's hot here a lot of the time. Okay, so it's important that we know how to say that. Hace calor. If someone asks you, ¿Qué tiempo hace? Say hace calor. Or if it's sunny, maybe it's not necessarily hot, but it's sunny, we can say hace sol, right? If it's cold, hace frío. If we want to say I am cold, we would say tengo frío. But if it's cold outside, if we want to say it is cold, we can say hace frío. What about if it's windy? We could say hace viento. So a good way to think about remembering these words. Let's look at the word sol. It looks a little bit like the word sun. It starts with an S. Okay, empieza con la S. It's a 3-letter word, just like sun. But think about when we're talking about energy that comes from the sun, we say solar energy, la energía solar. Okay, so sol looks like that word solar, right? Or in español, solar. So that's one way that we can remember it. With the word frío, this looks a little bit like the word fridge, right? Refrigerator, fridge, and a fridge is cold, right? It keeps things cold, so we can remember it that way. Viento, wind, you can think about it as, in our houses, we have vents. And vents help move the air back and forth. And that's what wind is, right? It's air moving back and forth. Okay, but with all of these expressions, we use the word hace. Usamos la palabra hace. Okay? All right, so to talk about rain. So the word llover means to rain. So it is raining, or it's going to rain. The word llueve means it rains. So llueve is a part or a form of the verb llover. So just like hace is a form of the verb hacer, and soy, eres, es, somos, son, those are forms of the verb ser, llueve is a form of the verb llover, to rain. So for example, when we say it rains, we might say, ¿A dónde vas cuando llueve? Where do you go when it rains? We can respond with, when it rains, I don't go anywhere. Cuando llueve, no voy a ninguna parte. Okay? The verb nevar means to snow. So again, nieva means it snows, and that would be a form of the verb nevar. So if we want to say, ¿Qué haces cuando nieva? What do you do when it snows? We can say, cuando nieva, juego con los amigos. So when it snows, I play with friends. Now, to connect this with what we've been learning the last few days with our definite articles, los artículos definidos, we have learned that those need to match our subject, right? So there is one example on this slide of a definite article. So our definite articles, what are they? El, la, los, las. I see right now one on this slide, and I want to see who can be the first to find it. So we're looking for, estamos buscando un artículo definido, a definite article, on this slide. Give you a moment to look for that.
Will you repeat that again?
Absolutely. So we've been learning about definite articles, right? El, la, los, las. There is one definite article on this slide, on this screen, and I want to see who can be the first to find it.
I found it. Found it.
Okay, so it looks like multiple people found it. So at the same time, what is it?
Los amigos.
Good.
Los amigos.
Good. Very good. Los amigos. So los matches the definite article, matches the noun, el sustantivo, los amigos. So give me in the chat an M or an F. Los amigos. Is this masculine or is it feminine? Los amigos. Good. Thank you, Khalil. Gracias, Khalil. Gracias, Alan. M or F? Gracias, Amari. Yeah, los amigos is going to be masculine. Okay, S or P. Is this singular or plural?
It's plural.
Good. It's plural. David Excel, can you tell us how you knew that it was plural?
Because the word los is masculine.
It's masculine, yeah.
And the plural end with S.
Good. The plural words end with S. Okay, las palabras plurales, so the plural words, terminan con la S. They end with S. Okay, good job. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going. We're almost done. So a couple other words that I want us to look at. The cloud is going to be el nube. So you can stay muted, but I want you to repeat this to yourself. El nube. Okay? Or the storm, la tormenta. So if we think about the word torment in English, torment, does anyone know what the word torment means in English?
To pester someone?
Yeah, to pester someone, or so it's something that is really it's really unpleasant to deal with, right? So storms are that way, right? So that's a way that you could remember that. So here's my question. We have el nube and we have la tormenta. So we have two definite articles. Can someone tell us what they are?
El and la.
Good. Love it. Awesome. And I know that sometimes we're a little bit nervous. Nos sentimos un poco nervioso when we unmute ourselves because we don't want to say something at the same time as someone else, but I don't want you to worry about that. If everyone unmutes themselves at the same time to say an answer, there's nothing wrong with that. I love that. The more voices, the better. Okay? So yeah, el and la. Okay, so el nube in the chat, M or F. Is this masculine or is it feminine?
Masculine.
Good. All right. What about la tormenta?
Feminine.
Awesome. So here's my question. It's sort of I don't know if I'd call it a puzzle, but el nube and la tormenta, they're different because they're different in gender, right? One is masculine and one is feminine. But there is something that they have in common. They're similar in one way. Can anyone figure out what that is?
Will you repeat it again?
Yes, absolutely. So we have el nube and we have la tormenta. So I want us to think about when we need words to agree with the definite article and the noun. We ask ourselves, is this masculine or feminine? And then there's something else that we ask ourselves. So knowing that, what does el nube and la tormenta, what is something that they both are? They have in common. I'll give you some think time. Okay, let's break this down a little bit. When we are trying to get our definite article, so el, la, los, las, when we need that to match our noun, el sustantivo, we ask ourselves two questions. We ask ourselves, is this masculine or feminine? And then what's the other thing we have to ask ourselves?
Is it plural or singular?
Good. So, what is something that el nube and la tormenta have in common? How are they the same?
Because it is singular.
Yes, good job, David Excel. Muy bien. They are both singular. We're just talking about one cloud and one storm. Okay? If I wanted to make el nube plural, how could I reword it to make it plural? Does anyone know?
Los nubes. Los nubes.
Los nubes. Very good. So we would change el to los, and we would add the s to nubes. What if we wanted to make la tormenta? Let's use the chat for this one. How about that? Because I want answers from as many people as possible. How can we make la tormenta plural? If we want to talk about more than one storm, type it into the chat. If we rewrote that to make it plural, what would it look like? Good, Khalil, David Excel, thank you. Good, Chisamaga. Yeah, las tormentas. All we would have to do is add the S to la, our definite article, el artículo definido, and then we would add the S to tormenta, las tormentas. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do when we're talking about the weather, we need to match these on the right to what's on the left to put a sentence together. So here's what we're going to do. Over here on the left, a la izquierda, I have different either months or a place. And knowing what we know about weather, we're going to make our best guess which one would match with the one on the left. So, en enero. Does anyone know what that means? Does anyone have an idea? En enero?
En enero, lluvia.
Okay, yeah, so it does. You're right. What does en enero mean, David Excel?
January. Rains on January.
Yeah, so we could absolutely put hace lluvia en enero. We could say en enero hace lluvia, so in January it rains, or we could switch the order. We could say hace lluvia en enero. It rains in January. Is there another one that we could use for January?
January season is rain, right?
Yeah, so that's definitely, there's more than one option, right? Because we have lots of different weather in the month of January. But okay, we have hace frío, hace calor, and hace fresco. What else could we use to talk about January, enero?
January season is rain.
Yes, good. We could absolutely say that. Could we say en enero hace frío?
I guess.
What does hace frío mean? Does anyone remember? Hace frío. Remember my hint?
It's cold.
Good. It's cold. Good job. Yeah. So we could also say that. We could say en enero hace frío. So in January, it's cold. Or again, we could switch it. Hace frío en enero. It's cold in January. Awesome. What do you think we would use to talk about the month of July? En julio.
Es caliente.
Good. Yes, we could say es caliente. It is hot. We can also say hace calor. So that's a good point. Well, there's two ways to say it. We could say es caliente, or we can say hace calor. Either one. So yeah, we would probably say that July is pretty hot, right? Especialmente aquí en California, right? Especially here in California, it gets so hot in July. So we could say en julio hace calor. Or again, we could switch it. Hace calor en julio. Okay? Now, I put in Oregon, en Oregon. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Has anyone been to Oregon? Any?
Nope, I've never been to Oregon before.
You've never been to Oregon? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have not been to Oregon. Does anyone know where Oregon is compared to us?
I guess Oregon
5 hours away or something.
Yeah, it's about 5 hours away. What were you gonna say, David Exel?
to travel to Oregon is by plane, but Oregon is located I guess it's the east side.
Mm-hmm. So it's on. Yeah. You have another idea?
I have no idea.
Yeah. So Oregon, if California, I'll pull up a picture in a little bit, but if Oregon is, or sorry, if California is here, right? Oregon is right directly above us. It's right above us, or it's, you can say it's north of us. Okay. Does anyone know anything about the weather in Oregon?
I know it's relatively cold most of the time.
It's pretty cold, and something happens there a lot.
It snows.
It does snow sometimes, but it rains a lot. I went to college there. I went to La Universidad de Oregon, the University of Oregon, and it rained almost every single day. So, how would we make a sentence with number 3? What do you think? All we have to do is put it together. So either in the chat or out loud. If we wanted to say, in Oregon, it rains, how could we say that? Good, Alan. Good, Khalil. Yeah, we could say, en Oregon hace lluvia. So in Oregon, it rains. Or we could switch it. Hace lluvia en Oregon. It rains in Oregon. What about this last one, September? I want you to think about September here in California, right? Septiembre in California. What's the weather like in September? Good, Khalil. Yeah. Anyone else have an idea in the chat or out loud? So sometimes it's cold in September. Sometimes it's not really cold. You would more say it's cool, which means that it's not freezing. It's not super cold, but there's a little bit of a breeze maybe. How would we say that? If it's cool, not necessarily cold. Good. So en septiembre hace fresco. So in September it's cool. Or again, hace fresco en septiembre. It is cool in September. Awesome. Good job. We will come back to that at another point. We're going to be talking about the weather all the time, but I wanted to introduce this to you. Okay?